Chapter 6. A massive bed stood in the center of the room. A massive bed with heavy carvings and a large wooden knob at each corner. Maggie approached it cautiously and slid her hand over one of the knobs. It was smooth as a glass ball and as cold. A headmistress's room with a braided rug on the floor. Framed scenes of some foreign city with canals and strange boats. And a dresser cluttered with bottles and hair things. "This is a bedroom," she said in her head to the 5 girls, "and this is a dresser, and these," she held up a clutch of pink objects, "are curlers." "Ooh, what are curlers?" "You wrap your hair around them, and after a while, you have a whole bunch of curls. Look, I'll show you." And she slowly wound ropes of her hair, wet still from her mouth, around the fat tubes in her hand, clamping them shut with a little click. "Ooh, how wonderful! What beautiful curls! All pink!" "No, dummies, these aren't the curls. Later, when I take the curlers out, you'll see I'll have beautiful curls all around my face." "Ew, lovely. What's this?" "That's a necklace. See this red stone? It's a real ruby. It's precious." Maggie cupped her hand and let the gold let the gold chain sink into a tiny heap, like a hill of sand, over the red jewel in her palm, burying it. "See this tiny circle?" she said, pointing with her fingernail. "This is the clasp, and this is how you fasten it around your neck. See how beautiful it makes me look? Only rich people have necklaces, like me." She stared at herself in the large mirror on the wall and turned one way and another until the stone at her throat caught the light and shone like a drop of crimson dew. "See how it sparkles?" "Ooh, what's this?" "That's a bunch of keys." "Ooh, what's keys?" "Keys are for unlocking doors. Look," and she led them to the bedroom door, where she tried one key after another until she found one that turned. "Ooh, look what happens!" the girls all cried as the little metal tongue shot in and out of its plate. "Come on, Maggie said. "Let's see the other rooms." And she led the 5 backwoods girls from the bedroom and down the hall. "Let's see what's in here," she said, opening another door and stepping into a room not unlike the one she had just left. The other aunt's bedroom. Aunt? Which one? Green or brown? Freckles or wrinkles? Harriet or Lillian? It didn't much matter. "Ooh, look how big." "Yes, it's big. Look what happens when I pull this string. The curtains open. And when I pull it again, they close. Now they open. Now they close. It's magic. Open. Close. Ooh, you broke the string." "Right. I can break anything I want around here." "Ooh, that's bad." "No, it's not. It's good. Look at this. It's perfume. Smell." And she sprayed a puff of mist into the air. "Ooh, delicious. Spray some on me, and on me, and me." "Okay, line up. You first, Anne." And she pressed the little rubber bulb 5 times more. "Now look at these. These are evening slippers. They're for going to parties. Ooh, how shiny." "They're satin, silver satin." She rubbed her smooth skin against her thumb. She rubbed their smooth skin against her thumb, her cheek, her upper lip. "Look how tall they make me." "Ooh, how wonderful. May we wear them too?" "No, you're too poor. Anyway, you'd fall. The heels are too high for you." And she extended her arms to balance her way out of the room across the hall to another door. "Ooh, what room is this?" "This is the bathroom, dummies. See the tub?" "Ooh, what's a tub?" "This. It's like the sink I showed you before, only you get into it all the way. Watch." And she turned the taps on full force. "Here's how you take a bath." And she removed the silver slippers and her socks and put both feet into the steamy bubbles. "It makes you clean," she said, stepping out again. "And this is what you use for drying yourself. It's called a towel. and you rub it back and forth like this until your feet are dry. Ooh, how wonderful! And the 5 backwoods girls waited while Maggie slipped her feet into the silver shoes again. Now follow me. And she led them down the hall to another silent door. This one opened to a bedroom just like hers, with a white metal bed, a dark blanket folded across its lower end, a sink, a dresser, a writing desk, a closet. She closed the door and continued down the hall. The 5 wondering girls, silent now and almost forgotten, trailing behind. The next 5 doors opened onto the same kind of room, quiet and still. At the 5th room, Maggie walked over to the dresser and pulled open the drawers. They were all empty, and the closet, too, its door tugged open, stood hushed and dark. Where was everyone? Sometimes on the day of a new arrival, the girls in a boarding school would play a mean trick. They would hide in a closet or a storeroom, all of them, piled into a tiny space so that they could barely breathe, while a strange hush would fall over the halls. And then in a burst of screams, it would wildly jump out as the new girl passed by. Maggie had been asked once to join in a group that had planned to do just that, but she had remained instead in her room, listening to the solitary footsteps of the new arrival. Mary Louise, her name was, and jumping in fright herself when the burst of screams finally broke through the silence in the halls. Maybe the girls in this school were planning to play the same trick on her. Maybe they were all squeezed into some dark closet, listening to one another breathe, listening to the heels of the silver satin slippers on her feet draw closer and closer, waiting for her shadow to darken the keyhole, when they would spring out and envelop her in their screams. But she would be prepared. She wouldn't jump or turn when the door, which one would it be, was finally flung open, and she would continue down the hall, not looking to the left or to the right, not showing even that she had heard. Still, she felt hidden ears straining for the sound of her footfall, and hidden eyes, too, perhaps searching through some unknown crack. Ooh, what's this? The backwoods girls asked. They had reached the end of the hall, were standing in front of the last door, bigger than the rest and paneled in wood so dark it looked black. This is another door, Maggie explained to the backwoods girls, and she cautiously put her ear against it for the sounds of breathing or a giggle muffled by a hand. It's a big door, she went on, hearing nothing and turning the handle. Surprisingly, she found herself not in another room, but on the bottom of a short flight of steps, ending in still another door. Maggie listened at the frame of this one too, and then turned the knob. The schoolroom. Carefully, she stepped inside. The desks, rows and rows of them, were the kind she had seen in books of long ago. They were attached, one to another, in a kind of endlessness that made her, closing her eyes, feel quietly dizzy. The seat back of one became the front of the next, and the seat back of that formed the front of still another, and on, as though in a bad dream, although they did have an end, of course, a beginning. The very first desk in the row had no seat in front of it at all, just a back. Another door, narrow this time and painted white, stood in the center of the opposite wall. Another door, narrow this time and painted white, stood in the center of the opposite wall, and Maggie led the 5 barefoot girls across the room so she could open it. She turned the knob and then held still. A bare room. The backwoods girls asked no questions as she gazed into the sunlight pouring unchecked through the narrow windows. A bare room, and yet everything about it suggested the presence of someone suddenly gone. A darkened rectangle of floor varnish, outlining a rug now removed at the center of each wall. A darkened rectangle of floor varnish outlined a rug now removed, and at the center of each wall hung a hook that held no picture. Wooden rods from which no curtain hung rested above each window frame, and a row of discolored circles marked the places where flower pots had once stood on the sills. The window looked onto the same garden she had seen from her own room, but now she noticed a swing, a single wooden board hanging by ropes from the branch of a tree. A breeze had stirred it slightly, and it gave a crooked start once, twice, the only moving object in a frozen scene. Maggie turned away. In this room, too, there was a single door in the opposite wall. Did this house have no end? Was every room going to contain a door leading to another room in a chain as dizzying as the thought of the seats and desks in the schoolroom? But this door opened only onto an empty closet. A single hanger swayed on the pole, and a strange silence swept over her like a hushed wind.